What the study says.
You know that feeling? That the morning after you've just stared at the ceiling all night? Or maybe woken up like every hour?
Oh, yeah. That feeling where you just never quite got
Right.
rested.
Exactly. Your brain feels like cotton wool. Everything's a bit blurry. I think, yeah, most of us have been there at some point. Sleep problems, they seem to touch almost everyone.
They really do.
Yeah.
It's so fundamental, sleep, but it's become this real modern struggle for so many.
Definitely. And it's not just about feeling a bit off, is it? Today we're doing a deep dive into what all these sources, the research, the studies we've looked at, what they actually say about sleep quality and sleep disorders.
Yeah, we want to get past the surface stuff.
Right. Unpack how common this is, the huge impact it has, and maybe most importantly, what the science says actually works to help.
Our goal here really is to pull out the key insights from all this material so you can get a clearer picture of sleep health and what it means for you specifically.
Okay, so let's tackle that first big question. Just how widespread is this? Is it like a niche thing, or are we talking massive numbers?
Well, the sources are very clear. It's a major public health issue.
Yeah.
I mean, look at chronic sleep disorders. These are the persistent long-term problems like insomnia or sleep apnea.
Yeah.
Estimates suggest they affect, get this, 70 million adults in the U.S. alone, and maybe 45 million across Europe.
70 million, 45,
Yeah.
just for chronic problems. That's wow.
It's an enormous number of people struggling day in, day out.
So what about people who, just have trouble sometimes, not necessarily chronic?
Well, that's where the numbers get even bigger. Around a third of adults say they have at least one symptom of insomnia, like trouble falling asleep or staying asleep.
A third, okay.
But here's what the sources really dig into, which I find interesting. When you factor in the daytime consequences,
Like feeling wiped out.
exactly, that crushing fatigue or trouble concentrating, maybe mood issues, all stemming from the poor sleep. Well, even then, the rate of actual insomnia disorder is still really high, around 10 to 15% of adults.
Okay, so it's the daytime stuff that often pushes people to seek help.
That's often the tipping point, yeah. They realize it's not just a bad night anymore. It's seriously messing with their daily life.
It's hijacking their whole day, not just the night. And you mentioned sleep-disordered breathing earlier, like sleep apnea.
Right, obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA, that's another huge piece of the puzzle. The estimates in the sources, they vary a bit, but they suggest it affects anywhere from, say, 9% up to maybe even 38% of adults.
38%, that's a massive range.
It depends on how it's defined and measured in the studies,
Yeah.
But the point is, when you add that to the insomnia numbers and other less common disorders, you're talking millions and millions of people.
This is definitely not rare. Chances are someone you know, or maybe even you listening, is dealing with this.
Highly likely. Far from rare.
That scale is, it's really eye-opening. So does this affect everyone equally? Or do the sources show certain groups having a tougher time?
The research definitely points to patterns and disparities. For insomnia, for instance, risk factors include being female, getting older, and having other medical or mental health issues.
Like depression or anxiety.
Exactly. The sources really emphasize that link. It's often a vicious cycle, Poor sleep makes anxiety worse. Anxiety keeps you awake.
Yeah, you can totally see that. What about other differences the sources found? Gender, background?
Yeah, there are variations. Women generally seem more likely than men to report trouble falling asleep and staying asleep. And symptoms can apparently get worse around menopause.
Interesting. Any differences based on race or ethnicity mentioned?
There were some observations, yeah. One survey mentioned, for example, that non-Hispanic Asian adults reported fewer problems falling asleep, while non-Hispanic white adults maybe reported more trouble staying asleep. And things like income and where you live might play a role too. Higher income and living in a city were linked, in that survey, to fewer issues falling asleep.
So definitely not a one-size-fits-all experience. What about sleep apnea disparities?
Also, clear disparities there. Men are maybe 2 to 3 times more likely to have OSA than women. Obesity is a big factor, of course.
Right.
But even controlling for weight, studies suggest higher risk or severity in some groups, like Hispanic and Chinese individuals, compared to white individuals at similar weights.
Really?
And one source noted something about daytime sleepiness being more common in Black, older adults with OSA, even if their measured apnea severity wasn't statistically different from white older adults.
That's complex. So is it just biology or is something else going on?
Well, that's a key point the sources raise. These differences likely aren't just about individual biology or choices. They probably reflect broader things like Societal factors, environmental influences,
Like what?
things like neighborhood noise, light pollution, maybe stressful jobs where you trade sleep for work hours, socioeconomic status. It
Yeah.
all feeds in. It's kind of like that social ecological model of health people talk about. Your environment, your society, it all impacts your sleep.
Okay, so it's common, some groups are hit harder, and it's influenced by our whole world, not just us. But let's get to the crunch. What are the actual tangible consequences? Feeling tired, okay, but what else?
This is where the deep dive really shows why sleep is so critical. Poor sleep health, whether it's duration, quality, timing, sleep apnea, it has serious, really far-reaching effects, way beyond just feeling groggy.
Okay, lay it on me. Physical health first.
Big links to increased risk of chronic diseases. We're talking heart disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, even systemic inflammation throughout your body.
Inflammation. How does bad sleep connect to inflammation and, like, your immune system?
Yeah, the sources discuss this. Sleep deprivation seems to impair how your immune system works. Some findings actually link chronic short sleep to a higher risk of autoimmune conditions, like lupus. The idea is that poor sleep might ramp up pro-inflammatory signal molecules telling your body to be inflamed and mess with the cells that normally keep your immune response in check. There's even mention of activating something called NFB, which is key in inflammation and immunity.
So bad sleep could literally be undermining your body's defenses. That's significant. And we touched on the mental health link, the anxiety-depression connection. More detail there.
Absolutely. The link is super strong and, like we said, often bidirectional. But what's really encouraging in the research is this. Improving sleep quality doesn't just happen if your mental health gets better. Improving sleep can actively lead to better mental health.
So tackling sleep could be a way to treat anxiety or depression.
It looks like a really promising target, yeah. The sources even mention a kind of dose-response thing. The more your sleep quality improves, the bigger the improvement in mental health symptoms.
Okay, that's hopeful. What about just thinking? Our ability to function, focus, get things done?
Oh, major impact there. Specifically on what psychologists call executive function.
Right, the skills for planning, problem solving, memory, attention.
Exactly, the higher level stuff. And the research is clear. Even one night of significant sleep deprivation can mess with your attention, your reaction time.
How bad is it?
Well, one source made a striking comparison. Performance deficits in motor skills after sleep deprivation can be like having a blood alcohol content of 0.05% to 0.1%.
Seriously? That's like being legally impaired for driving in many places.
It really puts it into perspective, doesn't it? Being badly sleep deprived isn't just feeling fuzzy, it's genuinely impairing your ability to function safely.
Yeah, no kidding. So is there like an ideal amount of sleep for keeping our brains sharp?
That's another fascinating finding the sources cover. It seems to be a quadratic relationship between sleep duration and executive function.
Quadratic, meaning?
Meaning, it's not just too little sleep that's bad for performance. Too much sleep might also be linked to poorer performance. There seems to be a sweet spot, an optimal range, though it likely varies between people.
So sleeping 12 hours isn't necessarily better if you usually feel fine on 8.
Interesting. And is it just the amount of sleep, or does the quality matter too, like waking up a lot?
The sources suggest quality might be even more important than just duration for executive function. Things like sleep fragmentation, waking up, frequently seem really detrimental. And there's a worrying potential link between poor sleep quality and a higher risk of dementia down the line.
Dementia. Why would fragmented sleep specifically increase that risk?
One biological mechanism discussed is the glymphatic system. Think of it as the brain's waste clearance system.
Okay.
It's most active during sleep, flushing out metabolic junk that builds up when we're awake. Things like amyloid proteins, which are linked to Alzheimer's. If your sleep is constantly broken up, this cleaning process might not work as well, potentially letting that waste accumulate over time.
Wow, so sleep is like the brain's nightly cleanup crew. Makes sense. Okay, so the consequences are huge. Physical health, immune system, mental health, thinking skills, maybe even long-term brain health.
Yeah.
Any other costs? Yep, economic ones too. The sources highlight this. People with insomnia, for instance, tend to have higher healthcare costs, hundreds, maybe over $1,000 more per year,
Yeah.
mentioned in one source, depending on severity.
Right, more doctor visits, maybe medications.
And then there's the increased risk of accidents. We talked about car crashes, workplace incidents. Those carry huge costs for society.
Right.
So yeah, it hits your body, your mind, your safety, and your wallet too.
Okay, that is a lot. It really drives home that good sleep isn't a luxury, it's essential. So, Given all that bad news, what can people do? Are there effective solutions backed by research?
Absolutely. And the good news is, yes, there are. While there's no single magic bullet, the research points to several evidence-based strategies. And the sources note people often prefer non-drug approaches, and there's good research on those.
Okay. First thing you always hear is sleep hygiene. Dark room, no caffeine. Does that stuff actually work?
Sleep hygiene. Yeah, it's the basics. Consistent schedule, cool, dark, quiet room, avoiding stimulants, limiting naps, etc. It's well known, low cost. But the studies suggest it generally leads to only small or maybe medium improvements on its own. It might not be enough for chronic or severe insomnia. One review sort of suggested it might be foundational, like maybe it helps most if your hygiene was really bad to start with, but it's not necessarily a cure on its own.
Okay, so necessary maybe, but not always sufficient. What is considered a really effective non-drug approach then?
Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBT-I. This comes up again and again in the sources as a top-tier non-pharmacological treatment.
Right. What does that involve?
It's a structured therapy, usually over several sessions. It includes techniques like stimulus control, basically, retraining your brain to associate your bed just with sleep and intimacy, not frustration.
Makes sense.
And sleep restriction, which sounds counterintuitive, but it temporarily limits time in bed to consolidate sleep and build up sleep drive. Plus, cognitive techniques to challenge worries about sleep, relaxation training, and keeping sleep diaries.
And the evidence for CBT-I?
It's really robust, consistently shows large, meaningful improvements in sleep. It seems particularly good for insomnia linked with anxiety or depression. The sources do note that having a therapist guide you, maybe face-to-face, might be more effective than just trying to do it from a book or app alone.
That human element, the personalization, probably makes a difference. Okay, so CBT-I is a big one. Any other lifestyle things that help? Exercise?
Yes. Exercise and physical activity get strong support in the sources for managing insomnia and boosting sleep quality.
Any specific kind of exercise?
Well, one meta-analysis focusing on non-elderly adults had an interesting finding. Resistance training, like lifting weights, actually came out as the most effective single type of exercise intervention for improving sleep quality in that study.
Wow, really? More than cardio?
In that particular analysis, yes. Though general physical activity also helped, and combining exercise with nutritional changes show benefits too.
So hitting the gym isn't just for muscles. It could seriously help your sleep. Good to know. What about just like a quick nap?
Brief naps get a mention too. They can help restore alertness if you've had a bad night. Not a replacement for good nighttime sleep, obviously, but helpful for coping with the daytime grogginess. And the sources also touch on other things like relaxation, mindfulness, maybe nutrition, suggesting they can be beneficial, often as part of a broader strategy, maybe combined with CBT-I or exercise.
Okay, so it sounds like there are several solid options, maybe needing different approaches for different people, not just one fix. And circling back to what we said earlier about disparities in environment, sleep isn't just about individual willpower, right?
Exactly. So much more influences it. We mentioned technology. Screen time before bed is a big one. Neighborhood factors like noise and light matter. And work schedules, people feeling pressured to sacrifice sleep for work.
Yeah. And it feels like, we hear tons about diet and exercise for public health, but sleep sometimes feels like the forgotten pillar.
That's an observation in the sources, too. There seems to be less focus, maybe, on big public health pushes for healthy sleep compared to diet or exercise campaigns. And there's definitely a call for more research into real-world solutions that address not just individual behavior, but those bigger environmental and societal factors.
This has been really illuminating. We've covered the sheer scale of sleep problems, how they affect different people, the profound impact on, well, everything, physical health, mental health, thinking, and importantly, what the research says can actually help.
Yeah, to kind of pull it together, sleep issues are incredibly common, they cost a lot, and they really do negatively affect almost every part of our health and well-being. And they're shaped by forces bigger than just us.
But, and this is the crucial bit, the research shows there are powerful evidence-backed strategies out there. Things like CBT-I, exercise, they offer real hope and can make a tangible difference.
Definitely. So given how absolutely vital sleep is for everything we've discussed, managing inflammation, keeping the immune system strong, clearing waste from the brain, staying sharp mentally, maybe it leaves us with a thought to chew on.
What's that?
What small change could you, listening now, maybe consider making tonight or this week to actively prioritize this essential process? Think of it not just as feeling a bit better tomorrow, but as a potential long-term investment in your health.
That's a great takeaway. If this deep dive into sleep research sparked something for you, maybe resonated with your own experiences, perhaps consider looking into these topics more. And if you found value in hearing what the sources say, please do subscribe so you catch our future deep dives, and maybe share this with someone else who could benefit from understanding the science of sleep a bit better.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the research.